subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, never think of those who are martyred in the cause or in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as dead. In fact, they are alive with their Lord, well provided for, rejoicing in Allah's bounties and being delighted for those yet to join them. There will be no fear for them, nor will they grieve, and they are joyful for receiving Allah's grace and bounty, and that Allah does not deny the reward of the believers. On the occasion of the martyrdom of our ninth Imam, Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, send our condolences to the awaited Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjallah Faraj al-Sharif, to the ulama and maraja, and to the entire ummah on the loss of such a noble and magnificent figure. And in fact, when we talk about Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, the very title of al-Jawad, meaning the generous one, is a title which was very rightfully given to this Imam because of the levels of generosity, because of the level of giving to people that he was able to perform during his lifetime. In fact, al-Jawad is probably the most accurate statement to give to this Imam because of the amount of generosity that he was known for, so much so that there was no other title apart from a very few select others which were as appropriate to give him. And we are blessed to be given the honour of attending this majlis for his sake, and attending every majlis for the sake of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam in its generous nature. And inshallah, one of the topics I want to focus on today is practicing this type of generosity in our lives and in our lifestyle so that we can become closer to a figure like Imam al-Jawad. Now, the Imam was a very unique figure, but unfortunately he is one of the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, which for a large number of people who claim to be adherents to the path of the Ahlul Bayt, who claim to be Shi'as of the Ahlul Bayt, they unfortunately neglect Imam al-Jawad. Sometimes they forget his characteristics, sometimes they forget the important role which he played in his society and community at the time, and unfortunately, God forbid, some people even forget about Imam al-Jawad as a whole. And inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive anyone who falls into this trap and forgives us if we do not remember Imam al-Jawad in the proper way. Because this Imam, our ninth Imam, was a wonderful figure, full of wisdom, full of, as we mentioned, generosity and piety as well. Humility and faith, serving as a beautiful role model for his followers. When Imam al-Jawad's father was in Khurasan, and when he was spending time away from Imam al-Jawad, the Imam used to attend to people who would come to his house seeking to gain food and aid to provide for themselves because they were poor and needy people. The way in which Imam al-Jawad would attend to these people and the way in which he would treat them was different from that of any other figure who existed in the city at the time. What he used to do was, when he would be bringing the food and aid to these people who were in need of it, rather than exiting out of the front door of his house, the main door, he would exit through the side door. Now, one of the reasons for exiting through the door at the side of the house was so that when he would bring the food out to people, they would not see him, they would not recognize him. Now, this was not due to the fact that he wanted to remain hidden out of fear necessarily, but out of humility. He did not want to be seen as someone who is only doing this for the sake of fame or for the sake of riyah. He wanted it to be done in secret because, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, that giving charity is good, but giving charity in secret is an even better act. So the Imam wanted to follow through on this. He would go out through the side door rather than the main door to avoid attracting attention to him and what he was doing. And according to the hadith that we have, Imam al-Rida alayhi salam also sent a letter to his son, to which the Imam followed upon. And this letter was sent not in order to direct his son to do it, because he wouldn't, but it was sent to Imam al-Jawad as an example for us in how we should live our lives, and as a practical lesson for us to implement in the way we go about things. In this letter, Imam al-Rida says to his son that whenever you want to go out of the house, and say for example you want to go into the centre, or you want to go and buy something from the marketplace, you should take with you gold and you should take with you silver in the form of coins, in the form of currency. The reason for doing this is so that if you ever encounter someone who is in need of this money, then you will be able to give it to him. But Imam al-Rida specifies further. He says that when you carry these coins, you should give them without the person having to ask for them. Meaning that you shouldn't wait for a poor needy beggar on the street to ask you for money before you give it to them. And this is the type of akhlaq that the Ahlul Bayt taught us, that we should give without having to be asked for it. And a practical lesson for us is that when we go out nowadays, we don't carry cash with us, we don't carry coins with us. And this is something which I think we need to change, because how else are we supposed to help people in the street, for example, who are needy? It's okay for us to give sadaqah online or to hand it in the mosque in a certain box, but when there is somebody in front of you in the street and they're in need of money or they're in need of assistance in some way, we should be able to provide this without them having to beg us for it. We should not put them through the shame and humility of having to ask for this type of aid. And this is what Imam al-Rida and Imam al-Jawad used to tell the followers of the Ahlul Bayt and how they should live their lives. Carry about these type of currency with you so that you can give without having to be asked for it. Now, most of the Shi'as at the time of the Imam accepted the Imamah of Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, despite the fact that he was extremely young, despite the fact that some people would come with objections saying that there are more appropriate figures to lead the community and lead the Ummah at the time. The majority of Shi'as accepted Imam al-Jawad. Why? Because his superiority in terms of his intellect, his intelligence, and his scientific knowledge and how the world worked was far more superior than anyone else at the time. And so even though he's extremely young, most people accept his leadership from among the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. But unfortunately, the low number of ahadith that we have from Imam al-Jawad is as a result not just of the fact that he was martyred at such a young age, the age of 25, but also because of the intense surveillance which was placed on the Imam, the persecution and oppression which he faced from the rulers at the time. Now, although the persecution may not have been in some senses as physically difficult for him, he wasn't tortured as much as some of the other Imams. For example, if we look at the life of Imam al-Kadhim, we can see that he spent a lot more time on this earth in prison and being subjected to various other forms of torture. However, Imam al-Jawad, having suffered different types of difficulties and trials placed upon him, unfortunately died at a very young age. And as I mentioned, we don't have a lot of ahadith from him in comparison to the other Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, who were able to transmit more to their agents and to their representatives than Imam al-Jawad does. But due to the restrictions that were placed on him, he had to get his message out to people. He had to continue on the legacy of his forefathers before him. He had to continue on spreading the true Muhammadan Islam of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The way in which he would do this is through his authorized representatives and agents. And these people would convey the messages of the Imams and take from him narrations and ways in which they could live their lives and ways in which the Shia could live their lives, and they would pass it on. Now, these figures were not just ordinary men and women. These were people of knowledge. These were scholars of religion. These were people who dedicated their entire lives to studying the deen of Islam. And coincidentally today, or as I should say in the last couple of weeks and days, we also have to remember a figure in contemporary world that we are living in today, last year, who unfortunately was martyred in a tragic accident. Of course, this figure was not just an ordinary man. He was a very esteemed, respected scholar and student of the Hawza. And that was Hujjat al-Islam Sayyid Ibrahim Raisi. May Allah have mercy on his soul. Unfortunately, when he was martyred along with his companions in the helicopter tragedy, the foreign minister Hussein Amir Abdullahian and the representative of the leader in Tabriz, Sayyid Muhammad Ali Hashim, may Allah be pleased with them, we are forced to remember them and remember the struggles and sacrifices and lifestyles that these people exemplified in their lives. Said Raisi, for example, being born just in the city of Mashhad itself is a massive honour which can be bestowed on a person. It is a massive blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a person to be born in the presence of such a holy figure, Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. But if you go into his lifestyle, you can see that this man, and the reason why I mention him, is because he is an exemplary figure of what it means to be first and foremost a student of the Ahlul Bayt, but also a lover of the Ahlul Bayt, and someone who tried to put their teachings into practice. And he had the best ability at doing this because of the position which he reached. But even from a young age, at the age of 15 years old, he enlists to go into the Hawza. And he enlists to go and study under some of the most noble and esteemed Maraja at the time. At the age of 15, if we compare 15-year-olds in the West, for example, they do not even know themselves. They're trying to come to grips in reality with who they are as an individual. They don't want to be involved in religious studies. They don't want to be involved in academic studies. But yet at the age of 15, he, having no father figure because he died when he was a child, takes it upon himself to go and study the religion of Islam. And if I compare it to myself, at the age of 25, I entered into the Hawza. He was 10 years ahead of someone like me. At the age of 20 years old, he is already the deputy prosecutor in the city of Karaj. 20 years old, he is the deputy prosecutor. Me at the age of 26, I'm at the very bottom level of my legal career. This person who grows up with no father, enlists himself in the religious studies, and then 5 years later is also the deputy prosecutor in the legal field, which requires a massive amount of intelligence to reach that level, is an example. He takes that example from Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam. Although Imam al-Jawad faces an incredible amount of pressure and difficulties on him as a young man, Sayyid Raisi looks at the life of the Imam and he sees the way in which he followed through on his duties, and he says to himself, how can I follow in the footsteps of Imam al-Jawad? And the way in which he does this is by having an understanding of his faith and the messages of Rasulullah and Ahlul Bayt, but also implementing this in an Islamic way in his country. But after all of the difficulties, just like Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, he remains steadfast in his path, and he makes these big steps in his life, and he is successful in them, so much so that he becomes the head of the judiciary, and eventually he becomes the president of the entire country. And what's important to look at when we talk about this is that he's not just the same as any other corrupt politician. Of course, being from Iraq, we know what a corrupt politician is, and we have plenty of them. But this man, this individual is different. What he does is that he dedicates 7 days a week, 365 days a year, to being the people's president, meaning that he goes around the entire country to every single province, and he meets with poor people and needy people, and he listens to them. He sits on the floor with them and eats their food, and it is as if he is one of them. He's not the president when he's around these people. He is an ordinary member of society. Although he is a scholar, he listens to the needs and demands of people, and he tries his best to fulfill it despite all of the difficulties which are faced in his country. This leadership style of sitting with people who may not be of the same rank or status as you, yet treating them the exact same way as you are, is one of the qualities of a true leader, as told to us by the Ahlul Bayt themselves. But if we talk about this man, we cannot neglect to talk about the most important and the most beautiful role in which he was blessed to serve us. And this is as a servant, as a khadim of Imam Riza alayhi salam. Now, when he is appointed to become the custodian and the servant of the shrine of Imam al-Rida, Sayyid al-Qa'id gives him 2 commandments that he wants him to fulfill when he takes part in this role and when he is blessed with this role. The first thing he says is that you must, first and foremost, serve the khidam, the servants, the pilgrims of the shrine. Whenever they come and visit Imam al-Rida, you must do your best and you must do your duty in serving them. The second thing is that you need to assist the local community who live near the shrine of Imam al-Rida. Because there's no use living in the land of Imam al-Rida and having an honour of being his servant blessed upon you if you are not going to be taking care of the people who surround the Imam. Not only was he just a servant of Imam al-Rida, but he was a servant, as we mentioned, of his people. Not just the people of his country, but the people of our region as well, and the entire world. And when we say our region, we don't just mean the Muslims. The effects of this man were seen by non-Muslims all around the world. Bearing in mind, at a time where the world is at war, especially with the religion of Islam, this man goes in front of the United Nations and holds up the Quran in a brave stance which no other Muslim leader has ever bothered to go and do themselves. He touches the hearts of so many non-Muslims through this act and other acts of standing with the oppressed people, so much so that we have religious leaders who may not even subscribe to any religion, never mind the religion of Islam. We have the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro. He comes out in front of the world and he says, "I am deeply saddened to have to say goodbye to such an exemplary figure as this Sayyid." And he is an extraordinary leader of the world, meaning he is not like any other leader which heads up a country. And he says that this man will always remain in my heart as an excellent human being. This is a type of praise which can only be seen in a person who has truly touched the lives of millions of people across the world. He is the embodiment of what it means to follow in the true path of Islam. He is the Sayyid who went and he showed the world not a false image of himself, but he showed the world his true, transparent self. He was very clear about how he wants the world to view him, and that is as a servant of Imam al-Rida and as a defender of the Quran and the religion of Islam. He is the one who went out in front of the world with courageous stances which no one else bothered to do. Whilst we sat and did nothing when the Holy Quran was burned, this person who has important things to do running his country goes to the other side of the world, holds it up and says that the words of this Quran will never die down, and anybody who tries to erase it will be unsuccessful. These speeches help ignite the flames of the religion of Islam and bring millions of people closer to this religion. But his companion Sayyid Muhammad Ali Hashim, the leader of the Friday prayers in the city of Tabriz, is also somebody that we cannot forget, and I will be doing a disservice if I do not mention some of his characteristics. Sayyid Ali Hashim's father is still alive. He is very old, and he is one of the high-ranking ulama that we have. And when he was alive, he did an interview once, and he said that when I die, I do not want one of the big scholars to come and read the funeral prayer over my body. I want my son to be the one to come and read it over my body. Talking about Sayyid Ali Hashim. He then goes on to say, my son is such a righteous and pious individual. He is of the highest quality that I do not consider him to be my son, I consider him to be my own father. Now, how many of us can sit in this room and can we say that our fathers treat us like their father? This is something unheard of. But what it shows is that this man and the lifestyle that he lived was of such a high standard, such a role model for us that his own father says, I consider him to be my father. These are the type of individuals that unfortunately we lost, but that paradise and Jannah gained. In the condolence message of Sayyid al-Qa'id towards Sayyid Raisi, he says something very important which I want to reiterate. He says, despite all of the hurt and all of the difficulties which the Sayyid endured, and despite the ingratitude, the selfishness, and the hatred towards him by some people, this did not deter him from his round-the-clock efforts to progress matters and to improve his society. This is very important, and I'll try and break it down what it means. But what it means can be described by al-Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Al-Imam al-Sadiq tells us that you will not be a true believer, mu'min, unless you are fearful of the punishment of Allah and you are hopeful for His reward. You will not be truly fearful and truly hopeful unless you avoid what you fear and you work for what you hope. And if we take the words of Imam al-Sadiq and we apply it into the life of the Sayyid, we can see that he did not falter and he did not stumble in his quest to have a better future for his community, his society, his country, for the region, and for the entire world, despite all of the difficulties which not just his own people, but people across the world put upon him. Sanctions, taunts, curses. He didn't falter. He made Islam the number one priority, and he made it the system of governance in his country in preparation for the awaited Imam Mahdi. One of the things I just want to quickly point out is, we need to ask ourselves, if we look at the funeral of this Sayyid, and we look at how many millions of people came, millions of people who attended the funeral processions, and hundreds of thousands who came from countries all around the world to mourn the death of this great man, we need to ask ourselves, why do we not see this in Iraq, for example? Why, if a president of Iraq dies, will nobody bother to go into the street? Why would we bother and go to march for these people? And the reason is very simple. The reason why we see so many people attending the funerals for figures like this is because our shuhada and our martyrs work for the sake of Islam, and they work truly for the sake of their people. They do not work for money. They do not work for power. They do not work for greed. If someone like Sayyid Raisi wanted to work for money and power, then he would have stayed working in the judiciary, because trust me, as you know, lawyers and judges get a lot of money. But he decided that he wants to put this past him, and he wants to seek something better. Why? For the sake of his people, and to progress the sake of Islam. Going back to Imam al-Jawad, I want to narrate a very relevant story which we can piece together with the life of this Sayyid. The Imam, when he was returning from the city of Baghdad to Medina, a group of people came with the Imam and they accompanied him, and they went to see him off as a sign of respect and as a sign of courtesy. And by the time of Salat al-Maghrib, the Imam realizes that he has to lead the prayer somewhere. And so they arrive at a very old mosque. When they arrive at this mosque, the Imam decides that he is going to pray here. So he goes into the mosque and he looks around, and he notices in the courtyard that there is a tree that has no fruit on it. It has no leaves. It is a dead tree which has not yielded any produce for people to benefit from. So the Imam goes and he does his wudu, and he goes and he reads the congregational prayer, Salat al-Maghrib, beside the tree. After he finishes, he makes the prostration of gratitude, sajda shukr. He then says goodbye to the people in the mosque, he bids them farewell, and he returns back to his city. Now the next day, the people who regularly attend this mosque go and they look at the tree in which the Imam had prayed beside and which he did the sajda beside. All of a sudden, after one day, this tree has yielded so much fruit. There is an abundance of sustenance which can be taken and ate from this tree. It's even narrated from Shaykh al-Mufid, centuries later, decades later, that he goes to this tree and he is able to eat from the fruits of it as well. Meaning that it is not a story which is narrated in folklore. This is something which has been verified decades later by our scholars. Now, why do I narrate this story from Imam al-Jawad? Because I want to link it to what we have seen from our Sayyid and from other humble servants of the religion of Islam. There's a narration, there's a riwayah which says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant a special place in Jannah for the leader who is just, the leader who works for his people. Just as Imam al-Jawad used his blessings by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to feed the people and to grant the people sustenance from this tree, we also need to take an example in how we can raise up people in our society and our community, especially young people, so that they can follow in the footsteps of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam by helping the people around them, by serving the people around them, and not serving their own self-interest. And this Sayyid that we have who is martyred is a perfect example, considering the ahadith that we have in praise of the people of Persia, in praise of the people of that nation and that land. This is why Rasulullah and the Imams have praised that nation so much, because in that nation, although there are corrupt and although there are bad people, there are lots of people who want to be servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and spread His message and preserve the true religion of Islam. So many people went to this man's funeral. So many people attended who, during his lifetime, they hated Saudi Arabia. They hated the system in Iran. They abhorred the concept of Islamic government. Yet they went to his funeral and they cried at his funeral and they grieved over his dead body. Now you have to ask yourself, if someone hated him all of his life, why did they then go and attend his funeral and mourn over him? They went to apologize. They went to ask Allah or ask whoever they believe in for forgiveness for what they had done during his lifetime. They realized after he had departed from this world and when he had ascended to his Lord, that this is a man who did not seek to govern for his own self-interest. This is a man who did not take a single holiday in over 3 years so that he could do his job properly and so that he could help the people of his land. They went to apologize because they realized the sacrifice this man had made. Likewise, when the corpse and the body of Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam was carried to the graveyard of Quraysh, thousands and thousands and thousands of people accompanied the body of Imam al-Jawad in his final appearance on this earth. That day where the body of Imam al-Jawad is taken through the streets of Baghdad is a day in which nobody at that time had ever seen before, and it is a day in which the city of Baghdad had never seen before, due to the immense number of people who turned out to say farewell to the Imam. Bearing in mind that during Imam al-Jawad's lifetime, a lot of people objected to him. Where were these people when Imam al-Jawad was being oppressed, when he was being tortured, when he was being persecuted? A lot of them were not to be seen. But when he dies, they come out and they mourn him. Why? Because they want to apologize. And the lesson I want people to take from this is that sometimes we neglect people during their lifetimes whilst they're alive, and it is only when they die or when they are martyred that we recognize their true worth and we recognize the sacrifices that they made in this life. So sometimes we need to pay attention to the people we have alive today, whether that be our family members, whether that be our ulama, whether that be certain leaders who lead movements. We need to be in recognition and we need to have the basira to understand these individuals and what they are contributing to our ummah. Otherwise we will be like those people who at the time of Imam al-Jawad neglected the Imam, yet when he died and when it came to the fact that he was no longer on this earth, they were lost, they were scared. To finish, we need to make something clear, and that is not to despair. That is not to feel upset or depressed whenever we lose a great figure in this life. Whether it is your father, whether it is your mother, whether it is a great leader in Islam who is martyred, do not lose despair and do not become depressed or devoid of hope. Why? At the time of Ayatollah Bahishti, when he was martyred, a lot of people were very anxious about the future of Shia Islam in the region. And they thought that they would go back to the days of persecution where the Shia would be neglected by evil tyrants and rulers. But Sayyidina Imam reassured them with just a few words. He says, do not worry, because our flag will be raised high up until the day in which its owner receives it. And the owner of this flag, as we know, is none other than Imam Sahib Asr al-Zaman, Imam al-Mahdi. And we have to have the faith and hope in our hearts that the reappearance will come soon. And we need to do what we can to promote and propagate our teachings and beliefs so that the return of the Imam can come quickly. To finish, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy on the souls of the shuhada and to give patience to their families and to grant steadfastness to those who come after them. And for all the shuhada, please recite Surah Al-Fatiha after Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.